Imagine your country is the richest in Europe. Now imagine that one man's signature quietly turns all of that wealth into a piece of paper. I'll be honest. When I first researched this, I said, no way, that can't be right. Because this man didn't just destroy a country. He saved it first. His name is John Law, Scottish, and yes, he spent most of his life as a fugitive because he killed a man in a duel. But that's not really the point of this story. The real point is that in the early 1700s, France was standing right at the edge of bankruptcy. When King Louis XIV died, he left behind so much debt that almost the entire government income went straight to paying interest. Think about what that means in today's terms. A country's budget mostly going toward interest on old loans, with nothing left to actually build anything. And right at that moment, a man nobody took seriously, a known gambler, walks into the royal court with an offer. He says, stop obsessing over gold, print paper money instead. Back then, that sounds about as crazy as someone today saying, just print the money you wish you had. But Law actually has a point, and once you hear it, it starts to make sense. And here's the part that's easy to miss. Law wasn't some random outsider who got lucky. He'd spent years studying banking systems across Europe, watching how the Dutch and the English handled credit, writing his own theories about money long before France ever gave him a chance. He wasn't guessing. He genuinely believed he had found the fix. That's actually what makes this story hit differently. This isn't a con artist stumbling into power. This is a man who was by most accounts right about the theory. The problem was never the idea. The problem was what happened once people got their hands on it. Law's idea is actually simple. A country's wealth isn't the pile of gold sitting in a vault. It's how much the economy is actually moving. If money circulates, trade grows. For that, you don't need gold. You need trust. The regent, Philippe, ruling in place of the young king, listens and decides to take the gamble. He gives Law permission to open a small private bank. That bank issues paper banknotes, and those notes are, in theory, convertible to gold. People are skeptical at first. Then something happens. These paper notes are easier to carry, easier to spend than gold ever was. Trade picks up. And here's where it gets strange, because the real twist starts right here. Law doesn't stop there. In 1717, he launches a company, the Mississippi Company. Its job is to develop France's colony in Louisiana, a place supposedly overflowing with gold mines, fertile land, endless riches. In reality, almost no one involved has ever actually seen that land, but it doesn't matter. Law's company starts selling shares, and within weeks, those shares become the only thing anyone in Paris is talking about, and this is where something starts to feel off. Nobody actually knows what's happening in Louisiana. People just hear that their neighbor bought shares and got rich. A tailor buys in and triples his fortune in a month. A servant girl is said to have bought her own house with her earnings. The word millionaire enters everyday language for the first time in exactly this period. Yes, that's literally where the term comes from. A street called Rue Quincampoix is packed around the clock, people camping out just to watch the share price move. But hold on to this thought for a second, because we're coming back to it. Law's Bank and the Mississippi Company eventually merge into one entity, which means the power to print the nation's money and this fantasy of colonial wealth are now sitting in the exact same hands. That's the part that turns out to be dangerous. And you'll see why in a minute. As prices keep climbing, Law keeps printing more banknotes to match demand. Everyone feels rich. Share prices for the Mississippi Company go up so fast that people start calculating their new theoretical fortunes on paper napkins in cafes. There's a story, probably exaggerated, but it tells you everything, about a hunchback in Paris who rents out his back as a writing desk for stock traders because the crowds are too thick to find a table anywhere near the exchange. But here's the strange part. Some of the sharpest investors, including people close to Law himself, quietly start converting their paper profits back into real gold and slipping out of the country. At one point, the Prince de Conti sends 3 carriages to the bank demanding gold purely out of spite. Law can't stop him. And that's the crack that starts the whole thing falling apart. Because once the people closest to the system start pulling their money out quietly, that's usually the first sign something's already broken. Early 1720, someone finally asked the obvious question. What are these shares actually backed by? There's no real answer. Panic spreads instantly. Everyone tries to convert paper into gold at the same time. The bank can't keep up. Crowds crush against the bank doors. People are trampled. Some die right there on the street. Law tries to control the panic with new decrees restricting how much gold anyone can hold, banning certain payments. None of it works. It only makes people more afraid. Law flees his own house. He disguises himself. He leaves France with almost nothing. The same man who months earlier controlled more wealth on paper than the king himself. The entire system he built collapses within a matter of months. France's economy doesn't recover for decades. Some historians argue this collapse planted one of the seeds for the French Revolution 70 years later, because an entire generation grew up remembering exactly what happens when trust in a government's money disappears overnight. So think about this for a second. That tailor, that servant girl, even the princes, none of them actually knew what was really happening in Louisiana. So why did they buy in anyway? Maybe the real question that isn't about them at all. Maybe it's this. When you decide something is valuable, are you actually looking at what it's worth? Or are you just watching how everyone else is behaving around it? Today, when a stock, a cryptocurrency, or even a house price shoots up, does the same thing happen? Does anyone stop to ask what's actually underneath it? Or do people just see their neighbor winning and jump in too, the same way that Taylor did in 1719? Law's story is 300 years old, but that feeling, everyone's making money, I need to get in too, hasn't aged a single day. Here's the strange part, and people usually miss. Law wasn't some villain twirling his mustache. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Disasters don't always come from bad people. Sometimes they come from a genuinely good idea that spirals completely out of control. Once you hear that one, Law's story is going to look like a warm-up.